Pitch invasions, slow walks in front of traffic and a lot of orange paint. Protests by Just Stop Oil have made headlines for months now, but are they working or have they taken their tactics too far when you see scenes like this with a mum trying to take her baby to hospital?
My baby, move! Help! No! Move!
Zoe Cohen, Just Stop Oil spokesperson with us, and Rupert Reed, who was an Extinction Rebellion spokesperson but now runs the Climate Majority Project. Hello to you both. Thanks for joining us. You must regret those pictures of the mum. I'm sure that you didn't support those.
Hi, Kay. Thanks for having me on. We're in such an awful position, aren't we, that unless we cause material disruption, it just doesn't get reported. I was on the streets of London with 100,000 other people at the end of April, and it got barely any media coverage, and we peacefully surrounded Parliament. Almost no media coverage at all. Sadly, we are in a position where our government and those in power force us into this position as ordinary people. I'm an ordinary mum, Kay. I empathise 100%. I hate disrupting people, but we have no choice. We have been trying every other approach for decades. It doesn't work. Look what's happening. Your top stories, 10,000 people in roads. 1 billion people are going to be in areas which are unlivable by 2030. That's the next 7 years.
That's certainly indisputable, but some would say, but do you condemn what happened with that mum? I mean, she was taking her baby to hospital.
We have a very, very clear blue light policy. I was on the roads a couple of weeks ago. We did a full week of slow marching. We have extremely clear blue light policy. We get off the road whenever there are any emergency vehicles. I understand 5 minutes later that march was cleared by the police. The police come incredibly quickly. Often we're only on the road for 2, 3 or 5 minutes. The delays are very short. London roads are delayed all the time by heavy traffic. This is tiny, tiny delays. We get out of the way for blue lights. We have to see things in perspective. Our living world is collapsing, and it is being done on purpose by people in positions of power who are licensing new oil and gas in a situation where we are exterminating life on Earth. It has to end. We have to disrupt, Kay. We have no choice.
Let's ask Rupert what he thinks.
Well, we are here for everyone who doesn't vibe personally with the tactics used by groups like Just Stop Oil. And we are here to represent the many millions who are now deeply concerned about this situation and want to do something about it and want to do something positive about it. So that's what I hope the media will give more attention to now. The fact that there is an upswelling in communities, in workplaces, of people who are determined to do the right thing. And they really need a spotlight shone on them. For example, I have colleagues working in community climate action who are trying to adapt and build resilience now in communities all across the UK in relation to the terrible weather that we had last summer, for example, the weather that we may very soon have in this country, just like they're having in the south of Europe. When people see other people building resilience, they realise how real the crisis is. And that's what a lot more attention needs to be given to now, those people who are taking action, stepping up in communities, also in workplaces. I could describe that too.
So tell Zoe why she's wrong. Tell Zoe why her tactics are wrong.
But look, I don't think that's really the point, Kay. I mean, this isn't a sort of puppet show where I'm going to kind of come across and say, oh, you're very bad, etc., right? The point is, let's turn our attention onto what we can do positively to make the situation better. Surely that would be a more positive and constructive way to approach matters.
You see, unless people do things that are slightly transgressive, non-violently transgressive, people don't notice the difference. So if I do this, Kay, if I sit on the floor in the studio, it's a bit different, isn't it? And it might get noticed because I'm transgressing the rules of an interview. People don't normally do this in an interview, do they? But it's completely non-violent. I'm not threatening anyone, but it's a bit different. So it's an analogy, right? We have to do things that are different to make people notice. When you do things that are the same and don't get attention, they don't cause a national conversation. When we know that the people in power are basically funded by the oil lobbyists and the climate deniers, you know, the Tory party had 3.5 million quid last year alone. When we know this, we ordinary people are up against this huge power. Huge power. And the oil companies have been lying to us and been plying misinformation and spending billions on it for decades. Everyone knows that. It was in that documentary, Big Oil v. the World. Everyone knows that, right? So we just have to speak the truth. People in positions of power are knowingly pursuing new oil and gas licences, knowing that millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, will die horrible deaths. because of it. What do ordinary people do when you're faced with that level of evil? You must resist it. And if all we need to do is sit on the ground or walk slowly or just throw jigsaws or orange dust that doesn't harm anyone, that's incredibly peaceful. I guarantee you, in the months and years to come, interviews like this will shock people that it wasn't more obvious that we're in the most desperate times. And when we look back at these interviews, we'll all wish that we'd done everything that we possibly could.
So we need to be more shocking, Rupert.
Well, what I think is unquestionable is that, as Zoe says, we are in an unprecedented situation. And I respect people who do what is their conscience to stand up in that situation. What we in the Climate Majority Project are trying to do is to represent the many people who are not up for sitting on the ground or sitting on the street.
You can sit where you want.
Well, that's very kind of you, thank you. What I would also like to do is be sitting next to a politician holding them to account, because on many occasions the Climate Majority Project gets set up against Just Stop Oil. And that's fine to have this interesting kind of discussion, but I want to be able to hold the people who are actually causing the trouble to account. I'd like to speak next time in your studio with someone like Grant Shapps or someone like the General Secretary of the GMB, both of whom say we need more North Sea oil, when self-evidently that's the road to perdition. So I'd love to ask you whether you'd be willing next time, rather than having me up against Zoe, to have me up against one of those individuals.
Oh, we'd love to get them on, but trust me, they would not be up against you. They would resist that. Well, it's tricky to get them in the studio, let alone start with somebody that doesn't agree with them. We always ask them, right. And we've got Michael Gove coming. Actually, he's making a speech with the Prime Minister in the next hour, where they're going to suggest there should be some relaxing of the green climate change rules for this government. Yeah, well, I would love to challenge Michael Gove. I've debated with him in the past. I've known him for many years. If he was here, what would you say to him? What I would say to Mr. Gove is, you were someone who, as Secretary of State for the Environment, actually took a bit of a lead, and you were surprisingly good. At this moment in history, we're 5 years further down the line now, and the situation is much more desperate. Why are you rowing in the wrong direction? This is absolute craziness. And the reason why, it seems, is to appeal to a tiny fragment of the Conservative membership and their crazy backers in high finance who just want to sweep away any remaining regulations and take advantage of the short-term profits that can be made to cause long-term damage and suffering. And that is completely unacceptable, and that is widely understood. So that's why what we in the Climate Majority Project say is it's time for the silent majority, the moderate majority, to make its voice heard loud and clear, and to make people like Michael Gove and Keir Starmer understand that they've got to go in the right direction, not the wrong direction, or they will be judged. They will be judged by history. They will be judged by their children and their nephews and nieces. But Zoe, you know, we're talking about a silent majority. That voice roared, some might say, at Uxbridge on Thursday when the Conservative was voted in, when everybody thought that Labour would hold that seat because of the proposed extension of the ULEZ project. I'm not sure it was a roar. It was a bit smaller than that, wasn't it? But there's been all sorts of tactics. They've got a seat in the House of Commons and Labour haven't. This isn't party political, right? It's party political because the Conservatives make it party political, and they're funded by oil money, as I've described. That's on the record. Please, everyone, look at it. Keir Starmer is asking the Mayor of London to look again at the ULEZ project. But can I say one thing about ULEZ, which is it's very important to bear in mind that it's got nothing to do with climate. It's a measure designed to reduce air pollution in London. It's to stop poor children and so forth from dying from asthma, which is happening a lot. And air pollution is really, really important. Okay, and air pollution is really important. And I think I've seen Gove talking about it's time to, you know, they're going to use this as an excuse. They want to wind back on everything. Let's remember, they're funded by the oil interests. It's not an accident that they're trying to wind back. Their very power is connected with oil. Their wealth, their power, their greed, it's all connected with the same people. They rotate between the banks, the oil companies, the government. But I'm right in saying it's not surprising. Is it your chairman who worked for Shell for 30-odd years? Am I mixing that up? We don't have a chair. I don't. Okay. So the guy who was in, forgive me, I can't remember his name, who was here instead of you. Graham used to work in the renewable energy part of Shell, and he thought he could change the system from the inside, and he realised he couldn't, so he left. And now he supports Just Stop Oil. Many, many people have done the same thing.
Many people have done the same thing. Look at the headline. Look at today's headline. 10,000 people needing to be evacuated from roads. Can we not just connect with reality, Kay? That's so important. Connect with those parents running on with flip-flops away, with their children in arms away from fire. People around the world are doing that right now. You know, peer-reviewed science says at least 1 billion people are going to be in conditions that are not livable by the end of this decade. We must connect with the reality. That means supply chains fail. That means economic failure. That's goodbye to our public services. That's goodbye to our stable food supply. There was a peer-reviewed paper only this week saying that there is increasing risk of global food failures, global crop failures around the world. We have to get real about this.
OK. We're almost out of time, Rupert, but just how do people find out more about Climate Majority Project?
OK, go to climatemajorityproject.com and you'll see the diverse ways in which people in workplaces, professions, businesses, for example, are taking action from the ground up. We're working now with insurers. There are lawyers who are litigating on this. There are lawyers who are coming together in big corporations to try to get their corporations swinging in the right direction. People who are totally unusual suspects, because this is about all of us now. This is about whether we have a stable future or not. And the pictures from roads show that very clearly, I think.
Okay.
It's time to pick a side. We need to go to juststopoil.org and come and join us on the roads.
OK. It's good to talk to both of you. Thanks for taking the time.